I congratulate President Trump for his courageous decision today. He boldly confronted Iran's terrorist regime. If the Iran deal is left unchanged, one thing is absolutely certain. In a few years' time, the world's foremost terrorist regime will have an arsenal of nuclear weapons, and that's a tremendous danger for our collective future. President Trump has just created an opportunity to fix this bad deal, to roll back Iran's aggression, and to confront its criminal support of terrorism. That's why Israel embraces this opportunity, and that's why every responsible government and any person concerned with the peace and security of the world should do so as well.
ادب و اخلاق هم بسیار اهمیت داره. حرفهای ناصحیح، ناروا، دروغ، اتهامات بی اساس نسبت به ملت بزرگ ایران. ملت ایران ملتی نیست که با حرفهای ناروا و سخنان تنفر انگیز بخواهند در برابر یک دیکتاتور سر فرود بیاورند. ملت ایران در برابر هیچ قدرتی سر تسلیم فرود نیاورده و نخواهد آورد.
More than 2 years ago, exactly in July 2015, the entire international community welcomed the result of 12 years of intense negotiations on the Iranian nuclear program. 104 pages full of technical details. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. It is not a bilateral agreement. It does not belong to any single country, and it is not up to any single country to terminate it. It is a multilateral agreement which was unanimously endorsed by the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231. It is a robust deal that provides guarantees and a strong monitoring mechanism so that Iran's nuclear program is and will remain exclusively for civilian purposes only. We cannot afford, as international community, as Europe for sure, to dismantle a nuclear agreement that is working and delivering, especially now. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, has verified 8 times that Iran is implementing all its nuclear-related commitments, following a comprehensive and strict monitoring system. There have been no violations of any of the commitments included in the agreement. The scope of the agreement relates to the nuclear program and is being fulfilled. The deal has prevented and continues to prevent, will continue to prevent, Iran from developing nuclear weapons. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action represents a key and functioning pillar of the international non-proliferation architecture that is even more important to preserve at a time of acute nuclear threat. We believe we have a collective responsibility to preserve it for our own collective security. The United States domestic process, and I underline domestic, following today's announcement of President Trump, is now in the hands of the United States Congress. The JCPOA is not a domestic issue, but a UN Security Council resolution. The international community and the European Union with it has clearly indicated that the deal is and will continue to be in place. The European Union continues to fully support the Iran nuclear deal and the full and strict implementation of all its provisions by all parties. The European Union, together with the rest of the international community, is committed to preserve it to the benefit of all, including the Iranian people.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions. Lawrence.
Thanks, Val. Lawrence Norman in the Wall Street Journal. Can I start with the question of whether Mr. Trump can terminate the deal? You just said he cannot. He just said he can. Which one of you is right? Can you explain that to us? And secondly, and crucially, if Mr. Tillerson comes to you in January or February after a change in the US law, if that happens, and says, let's work on a successor separate agreement dealing with ballistic missiles and sunsets in the agreement, or Mr. Trump will kill this deal, what will you say to him?
I just spoke to Secretary Tillerson, and that was not part of our conversation. I don't need to explain to you that know the deal very well. This deal is not a bilateral agreement. This is not an international treaty. This is an annex, a very long annex, to a UN Security Council resolution, unanimously adopted. To my knowledge, there's not one single country in the world that can terminate a UN Security Council resolution that has been adopted, even more so adopted unanimously and implemented and verified, and with the rest of the international community continuing to support and implement it. So it is clearly not in the hands of any president of any country in the world to terminate an agreement of this sort, because this is a UN Security Council resolution. This is a plan of action that sets things to be done, commitments, nuclear-related commitments, and only nuclear-related commitments, and that is being implemented. So the President of the United States has many powers, not this one. The future, I believe, as I said, the rest of the international community and for sure the European Union will preserve the agreement. Can anything else be negotiated? I guess someone that has a deal maker experience knows that to make a deal you need to have an interlocutor that is interested and ready to negotiate to get to an agreement. And you should ask this question in Tehran right now. For the moment, this agreement is working, has been implemented, continues to be implemented, and not only as a High Representative of the European Union, but also as the one that has the responsibility to continue to see the implementation of the agreement in place, I would expect all to continue to stick to it, as it has been now the case for almost 2 years.
Yes.
Bonjour, Isabelle Horry, Europe 1, une question en français. Monsieur Trump a eu des mots très durs contre l'Iran tout à l'heure, en disant que c'était un
Mr. Trump used very strong language in his speech.
Est-ce que vous pouvez expliquer aux Européens pourquoi c'est quand même bien d'avoir un accord avec ce pays-là?
Can you explain to Europeans why it's a good idea to have a deal with a country like this?
La dénonciation de, enfin comment on dit, la décertification de cet accord aujourd'hui.
And what do you think of this decertification?
Le discours du président Trump ouvre un processus interne.
Mr. Trump's speech opens a domestic political process.
Qui ne se termine pas et l'impact duquel devrait être, comme je dis, évalué après.
The impact of this can only be evaluated later.
Décider ou ne pas décider. Si la position des États-Unis change,
if America's position changes,
l'accord n'est pas dans les mains des Nations Unies.
The deal is not in the hands of the United States.
Sur la qualification de l'Iran,
as far as the qualification of Iran is concerned,
parce que c'est exactement quand il y a un problème qu'il faut trouver un accord pour le gérer. S'il n'y avait pas de problème,
if there hadn't been a problem,
pendant 12 ans,
we wouldn't have spent 12 years trying to resolve it.
Des nuits, des semaines,
long nights, weeks of discussions went into this.
La fête nationale française, le 14 juillet, pour détailler.
And it was an extremely detailed plan.
Avec une forme extrêmement précise tous les engagements nucléaires à respecter.
The nuclear engagements taken by Iran were extremely precise.
Qui était là,
And we are confident that there was enough detail in this deal to make it stick. And our decisions since haven't been based on any trust, they've been based on observable verification. The idea of reopening it or renegotiating parts of this deal implicates that the accord no longer exists. So there's no political space to actually do this.
Thank you very much. We will stop there and see you on Monday.
So first of all, this evening we heard from Donald Trump giving his opinions on the Iran nuclear deal.
Now, U.S. House Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi has labeled as, quote, a grave mistake of President Donald Trump's refusal to certify the Iran nuclear deal. Now, she says the measure will threaten U.S. security and will isolate the country.
President Trump's refusal to recertify is a grave mistake that threatens America's security and our credibility at a very critical time. The president is ignoring the overwhelming consensus of nuclear scientists, national security experts, generals, and his own cabinet, including reportedly the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State. The fact is, Iran remains in compliance with the nuclear agreement. If they did not, we would not be supporting certification. If Iran were not in compliance, our allies would walk away. They are not. Supporters of the agreement harbor no illusions about the Iranian regime. That is why the agreement is based on proof, not trust. It has set up the toughest detection, inspection, and verification framework ever negotiated. Threatening this agreement does not isolate Iran. It isolates America. The president put forth some statements that are blatantly not true, and I'll depend on all of you to do the fact-checking on some of the statements that he made. One in particular was that the regime was ready to fall until we did this agreement. What? On the basis of what is he making that statement? The regime in Iran was ready to fall. Did you know that? And then we came in and bolstered them. The other, he talks about the money that went to Iran. It's Iran's money. He doesn't tell the American people the money that went to Iran was Iran's money. And if they had challenged us in an international court on it, we would have lost and it would have cost more.
And joining us now in New York is our own Press TV's Susan Modatis. Hey, Susan, thank you for joining us there. Now, it's funny because, Nancy Pelosi came out within half an hour after Trump took the lectern and made his decertification speech to show just how passionate and concerned some U.S. lawmakers are about the president's stance on this accord. Your update, please.
That's absolutely right. Nancy Pelosi is a Democrat, so you would consider Democrats to take that stance, considering that the deal was made when a Democrat was in office, being Barack Obama. But the interesting point is that even Republicans and individuals in Donald Trump's own administration have expressed concern regarding this speech. Now, for two reasons, not because they feel allied with Iran in one way or the other, but like Ms. Pelosi said, it was based on principle. It wasn't based on trust. And for the United States to back down, where it hasn't backed down, but for Donald Trump to come out and decertify, it doesn't necessarily mean that it pulled out of the deal. What it does mean is that it creates an atmosphere of distrust, not only here in the United States, but also around the world when the United States wants to potentially sit at the negotiating table with others. Let's say North Korea is watching very carefully how this administration is going to act in regard to the Iran deal to see whether or not it's even worth it for them to go to the negotiating table at such volatile times. You have Mattis, you have McMaster, you have Secretary of State Tillerson, presumably Mr. Kelly, telling Donald Trump that saying that the deal is, that Iran is not in compliance and he's decertifying the deal could have a domino effect on other issues. So that's the main concern here. Another concern is Donald Trump presented himself as being a one-trick pony, as one official told me off the record, saying that basically he is dealing with every single multilateral negotiation in a single way, passing it on to Congress. There isn't a single multinational agreement that he agrees with. Look at NAFTA. Look at the Paris Agreement. As the president of France told him, he just doesn't like deals that he hasn't dealt with himself. But then when it comes to dealing with deals that he deals with himself, he passes it on to Congress. So Congress has a full hand right now. It has to deal with healthcare. It has to deal with the Paris Agreement. It has to deal with the Iran nuclear deal. So these are all concerns. Another concern is to bring the IRGC into the equation. Even the Bush administration, not only the Obama administration, was very sensitive and very careful in tiptoeing around how it deals with the IRGC. Why? Because for the United States, its military front is concerned that Iran may somehow retaliate in the region in what the United States, quote, calls its Iran's proxies. So they're afraid that their troops will be at risk. They're also concerned that Iran will continue to expand its defensive missile program, which it has says it's for peaceful purposes. So, you know, this wasn't, as Donald Trump thinks, that just because he won an election, based on false claims and promises, international deal-making is very dangerous. And as Foreign Minister Zarif told me, he has to find it, he has to come to an understanding that international deal-making is not real estate, and hopefully he won't figure that out the hard way. So it's not just the Democrats, it's not just Nancy Pelosi, we have to understand that it's people within his own party that are concerned that backing away from this deal or basically throwing cold water on it by creating an atmosphere of mistrust is not in U.S. national interests. It's not just sticking to the deal, it's isolating the United States with his allies. And we have, you know, you have a partisan Congress that basically nothing gets done at this point, and then you have the commander-in-chief that goes off script every now and then. So we have to be mindful that Donald Trump's speech was not America's stance. It was Donald Trump's stance when it came to the nuclear deal. And I just want to add something, if we have time. Iran's ambassador to the United Nations just minutes ago issued a statement on the part of Iran to be circulated to the United Nations Security Council. The letter was addressed to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and it outlined Iran's position since 1979, since Donald Trump became a historian in the beginning of his speech, and referred to 1979 and continued to this day with his allegations. It starts with, the letter starts with 1979 and how the Islamic Revolution, the Iranian Revolution came about and where Iran stands at this point. And time and again, it states that Iran's defensive missile program was not part of the JCPOA. So there is sort of this talk that Donald Trump, half jokingly, hasn't even read the deal, does not know the content of the deal. There is no sunset clause.
We're going to have to leave it there, Susan. I want to thank you for your update and for your input there. Joining us out of New York, that was on Press TV's Susan Medeiros joining us.